as I was sitting there editing this video, I just know there's going to be someone in the comments saying this doesn't sound anything like an orange amp. Well, the recording doesn't do it any justice. And I already said that in the video, but I just wanted to come on here and reiterate it because I know there's always going to be one smartass who's going to say it because they're listening from their computer or their phone. And no, it really doesn't sound like an orange amp in this recording. Unplug, play it through your amp, play it loud, and you'll see what I mean. Enjoy the video. Welcome back to another Boss Katana Mk2 tone tutorial. Obviously, by the title, you know that we're going to be doing an orange amp, making your Katana sound like an orange amp or as close as possible. Now, orange is a very iconic sound, a very bright and punchy British sound, and I did my best to get as close to that as possible. I did used to have just a little 35 RT. That was awesome little amp. I wish I never got rid of it, but now I can make my Katana sound really close to it, so I don't need it back. So I've got 8 tones that you can play with. Unfortunately, it is not going to sound nearly as good coming through this recording as it will on your amp, and when that amp is cranked up to almost an uncomfortable in the house level. So as loud as you and your family and your neighbors can tolerate it, the better it's going to sound. So let's get into it. All right, I'm showing you everything today. I've got it pulled right up here. I've got my panel and all my channels already have the Liveset loaded, and we're just going to be going through the editor. And I started out basing this whole thing on just a clean amp with the variation, with some gain cranked up and a couple little tweaks here and there, with the parametric EQ being one of the main ones. Now, right off the bat, like I said, you got clean and the variation, and I got the gain up to about 56 on most of them. It's within that threshold between 48 and, let's see, that one's at 43. So yeah, it's up in that, between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock range. I do have my amp kind of turned up to about 9 o'clock, and when it's unplugged, it is loud. And I've got each one of these tones turned down to about 50, and we're going to turn them up so you can hear them just a little better throughout this tutorial. We're not going to try to make this one too long. But I've got the chain set at 2-2 because I do have a compressor in front of the booster. Is it necessary? Not necessarily. Anyway, I got the bass on this one, 59, 56, 55. Basically, I played with the EQ, added a couple mods here and there, and I'm using the vintage cabinet over here. The presence set about 65, and you'll see that most of these settings throughout are very similar or the same, except when it comes to maybe the parametric EQ or the boost we're using. Now, for the super clean, we've got this one going, and in orange amps, even when they are clean, they're still a little dirty, and they got a very nice punchy, jangly sound to them, especially when you really crank it up and they sound good. Let's hear what this super clean sounds like. Let's crank it up some on the volume. Like I said, it's going to sound a hell of a lot better through your amp, so keep that in mind through this whole tutorial. And I've got no booster on this. I do have a light compressor with just a few little adjustments here and there. And over here, I do have a chorus turned on with just not too high or too low all the way across, just to give it a nice, clean, singing sound to it. For the reverb over here, I've just got a spring reverb, kind of subtle as far as time and delay goes. Density is at 5, the color is all the way up, and the effects level is at 38. I've got no contour and no delays on this one, but over on the parametric EQ, I have the low gain turned to plus 4 decibels and 3 decibels on the low mid. I've got the low cut at 50. 250 is right about where I keep that most of the time. I do have the high mid frequency turned down a little more than usual, but I've got the high mid gains and the high gain kind of cranked up to 4, and the level boosted way up there at 7, and the high cut right at my sweet spot. Over here, I do have the threshold at 50 on the noise suppressor, although you really don't need it on the super clean tones. You won't really need it until you start getting into these drives and these high gains and leads over here. But that's what the super clean sounds like. I don't expect you're going to go through and make all these adjustments anyway, you're just going to download it from the Boss Tone Exchange link that I'll have in the description for you, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. You get all 8 tones in one live set, and you can adjust them to your liking and have fun with it. And let's move on to, that was a super clean, let's move on to the clean, which is a little grimier. I do have a clean boost on here with the drive cranked up, as well as the tone and bottom on there, and the direct mix at 50, effects level at 50. So, but on this one I do have the gain turned down a little bit because I got that booster kind of high there. The equalizer is just about the same, and the chain is the same as it was before because, again, I have that light compressor with some minor adjustments here. On the reverb, again, I got the spring reverb. It's probably very similar to the super clean because I based the super clean off of the clean. And I started out with this specific tone, just the orange clean, and then I worked around it as far as every other tone I've got in this set list. The presence is the same. Over here, I've got the low gain turned down just a little bit. I think that's about the same as it was before. But I've got the high mid turned down and the high gain cranked up a little bit. And this one turned a little bit down from the super clean. So that's your clean. Screw that up. And the next one we have Clean Trem. This is just the last one with, I've got a tremolo added to it, and it just gives it a nice tremolo sound to it. Now this is where it gets a little fun. We got the orange drive, which to me is the best representation of a driven orange amp before we get into the high gains. So with the orange drive, I've got the gain turned up a little bit. I got the volume at 50. Let's crank this up to about 85. These are almost the same. And the chain, again, I've got -2 because I've got a compressor over here with the same ones as the clean head. But the booster, I've got just a crunch overdrive. Without the crunch overdrive, it just sounds like the clean. With the crunch overdrive, it makes a huge difference, especially with the drive at 60 and the tone at 17, the bottom at 8, and the direct mix at 50. For this one, I do have a spring reverb, same as the other one, no delays. And let's hear with that crunch on. Next up, we got high gain. Now, this is boosting it up quite a bit, and on this one, I used pretty much everything as it was before. But I've got the governor in here, and quite a bit more distortion to it. And over in here, I've got some more low gain on the parametric EQ, and I bumped the low cut up a little bit too, and I've got everything else pretty much cranked. So this one, I might have a spring or a plate reverb. No, I left a spring on there. That's cool. But I do have the noise suppressor here. You can play with that a little bit. Let's crank this up here, and let's hear it without. Is just the clean, and with the governor on there. Now, from the high gain to the high gain 2, there's actually quite a big difference here. In the high gain 2, I used the crunch amp and the Senta OD for the boost. Everything else is very similar. It's just I just used a different boost and a different amp. So back over here, cranking it up. So let's hear it with the crunch amp and the Senta. Got a nice British feel to it. So that's the main difference from HiGain 1 to HiGain 2 is I use the crunch and the send to OD. And moving on to the lead, now this is where you're going to have to really be careful, especially when you start cranking on it because it's loud. So you got to get that noise suppressor on the lead kind of adjusted properly. And again, on the lead, I used crunch, but over on the boost, I've got the Governor DS because that adds a little more distortion on that part. Over here on the parametric EQ, the settings are similar to the Orange HiGain, and for reverb, I've got plate reverb on here. Of course, for the mod, I've got a compressor, but this one I use the Boss compressor, and I crank the attack a little bit and turn the tone down just a hair. For the chain, still chain -2. So let's hear it before I crank it. Crank up the volume some here. So it's got a nice lead sound to it. And lastly, we got the Orange Fuzz. This is just basically the clean amp with the Muff Fuzz as a booster, and I did play with the parametric EQ just a little bit more because it was too much lows in there. And on this one, I did use a contour. I've got the Contour 4 frequency shift at 31, and it's just it's a muffy fuzz. But you can play with the other fuzz, and I will show you here in just a second. I think a better representation of using fuzz sometimes is using a single coil. I'm going to grab that Mustang right behind me. For some reason, to me, single coils sound a lot better through fuzz, but that's just me. Maybe, I don't know. How do you feel about that? You feel fuzz sounds better through single coils or humbuckers? Leave a comment below. Let's hear it. Hopefully it's in tune. That's the Muff Fuzz. Let's play with the fuzz a little bit here. Let's go to the octave fuzz. That one sounds a little more broken speaker-ish. And let's take a look at the 60s fuzz, which the 60s fuzz is a little bit more mild than the other fuzzes. Let's bump up the drive on that and the volume. Why not? Lastly, the Rat. Because I think the Rat is probably the best sounding fuzz on here. Is it really considered a fuzz? Sometimes. Sometimes not. But a Rat can be a fuzz, a distortion, and an overdrive pedal. If you ever had one, I highly suggest you get one and play with it. They're a really cool booster. Let's turn down that drive. That's way too much for a Rat. Switch pickups here. If I ever do a Jimi Hendrix tone, I'm going to use a Rat because, like I said, I think it's the best sounding fuzzy booster than all the rest. Like I said, over here, I did have to turn down the low gains and play a little bit more here, bust up that high cut just a little bit more past that favorite spot of mine at 5, just to give it a little more edge on it, and bust up. I keep saying bust up. Bump up the low cut just from my usual 40 to 50. I didn't want to go too high because then it gets a little too muffled. And that was it. Like I said, I got the contour on there. And I've got a light compressor. Now, let's see if you can hear a huge difference with the compressor. You really can't. So that's up to you if you want to use that or not. I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, but they said, hey, it would be awesome if you could do an orange amp, and it got me thinking, why haven't I? Because I love the orange amp sound, and I was thinking about getting another orange amp, and if I don't need to, because I got the Katana now. So thanks for making that suggestion, and here you go. Unplug it from the computer, unplug it from your headphones, crank it up, make that speaker work, make that cabinet work, because that makes a big difference in the entire sound and reaction of that speaker. And you're going to find playing it through the amp loudly makes a huge difference and really makes this tone shine, this whole Liveset shine. So enjoy this Liveset. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a like up there. And if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. You'll get more content just like this, and maybe I won't ramble on so much next time. Lastly, if you want to download this tone, there's a link down in the description. You can download it from Boss Tone Exchange, free of charge. All the volume set at 50. So you're going to have to find a comfortable spot on your amp and then adjust it from there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.